Hello?
It should kick on now.
Kick on now? Check. Okay, here we are. Welcome, everyone, to our January 2025 meeting of the Historic Conservation Commission. I'm Gary Lader, Chair of the HCC, and I would like to introduce the commission. To my left is Jeffrey Long, our Historic Officer and Registered Architect. To my far left is Greg Evans, resident of the district. To my right is Todd Chambers, architect with business in the district. Next to him is Desiree Strasser, resident of the Mount Airy district. And finally, Mike Simonson, chief building inspector. Ordinance information. It is the purpose and intent of the city of Bethlehem to promote, enhance, and preserve historic resources, traditional community character for the education, cultural, economic, and general welfare of the public through the preservation, protection, and regulation of buildings and areas of historic interest or importance within the city, which have been determined to be of local, state, or national significance. The way the meeting will unfold is the applicants will be taken in order. Well, except this time we switch things, so we'll get into that in a moment. After identifying the project address and the presenters, our historic officer will provide a background on the building and any recommendations. At the time, the applicant will present their project and plan. The board will then address the project, allow public comment, and ultimately create a motion to approve as presented, approve with modifications, table the project with clear recommendations, or deny the project with reasons for the denial and changes or improvements which would result in a positive recommendation. For public comment, there is a 3-minute time limit, and comments must be specific to the attributes of the building only. Speakers are to announce themselves with their name and address before speaking. The HCC is a recommending board, and the results of our meeting will be presented to City Council, and their vote will be binding. Please do not forget to secure your permit from the permit office on the first floor of City Hall before you begin your project. Above all, I remind everyone to conduct themselves in a civil manner and always use a civil tone. The commission is here to help you with your project. We are a group of volunteers who are dedicated to historic preservation and restoration of older buildings in Bethlehem and beyond. If any commission members have a conflict of interest with any of the applications on tonight's agenda, please come forth at this time. And I don't see anyone raising their hand. Great. We have just one bit of official business as our first agenda item tonight, and that's to elect our chair and our vice chair. So first, I'll ask for a nomination for chair.
I'd like to nominate Mr. Gary Lader for chair.
Okay. All right. And then we'll put that to a vote. All those in favor, Craig?
I'll
Oh,
second it.
thank you. Thank you.
Aye.
Aye. I vote aye as well. Todd, Desiree. Okay. Sounds unanimous. And then we need a motion for our vice chair.
I'd like to nominate Mr. Craig Evans for vice chair.
And I'll second that one and put it to vote. Craig? I vote aye as well.
Aye.
And aye.
Okay, great. So with that out of the way, we again have our chair and our vice chair. Thank you, everyone. We are just switching our order tonight, and would the applicant for 708 East 4th Street come up to the front desk and please announce your name and sign in.
Right, you can sit right there if you like it. Just make sure you sign.
All right.
If you could please print your name instead of signature.
It's a little extra volume tonight. Go ahead, please give us your name.
My name is Liz King. I'm here for 708 East 4th Street.
Okay, thank you, Liz. And the gentleman next to you.
LaFonte King,
Okay.
here for 708 East 4th Street also.
How do you spell your name?
LaFonte, Lafonte, and King, King.
Okay, thank you very much for coming. Jeff is going to give a brief description of your project, and then with that, we'll ask you to give us more information.
Before I do the assessment, it was a little unclear. There were a lot of photographs. the streetscape, but it wasn't labeled specifically which building we're discussing. So for the record, I'm just distributing a photograph of the building in question,
Okay.
just to clarify things. I'll be right back.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. Wow. What's that?
And the photograph has the full building, and we're looking at standing in front of the left half. Okay. And specifically that shop window on the first floor. The building description, period, style, and defining features. The structure is a 2-bay, 2.5-story, semi-detached, brick, commercial and residential building with a shared, steeply pitched front gable, original slate roof, and a large shop window with applied upper divisions. The building dates from circa 1920 and is Queen Anne in style. Proposed alterations. The applicant proposes to install window graphics, all white, one measuring 18 inches in diameter, one measuring 12 inches by 40 inches. Each sign is to be centered within the window frame. So that was on the application of the agenda. They are placed in different locations on the window frame, and I'll clarify that as I go through the assessment. So the guideline citations I used for my assessment include the Secretary of Interior Standards number 9 concerning new additions, exterior alterations, etc., that they will not destroy the historic materials, features, spatial relationships that characterize a property. The Bethlehem Ordinance that Mr. Lader read at the beginning of tonight's meeting, the Historic Conservation Commission guidelines for signage, and the Historic Conservation Commission guidelines for storefronts. My evaluation, the effects on the district, and my recommendations. The Certificate of Appropriateness application indicates the intent to install signage for a new commercial tenant within the existing shop window. The project description and the supplemental details offer no indication of the intended materials. The scale drawing of the proposed signage with an elevation view of the facade as required on the application is not included, so the application is incomplete. The provided graphics indicate one proposed sign that measures 18 inches in diameter in white color. Supplemental hand sketch indicates the round sign is centered vertically and horizontally within the central division of the upper window. So you have the storefront. Over time, it was segmented into a lower, larger, and then almost like a glorified transom with 3 segments. This is in that upper segment in the middle division. The sign includes the letters KE in large, bold, sans serif, uppercase lettering.
Oh, thanks.
They are
Okay.
encircled within the lettering that spells out King's expressions in small, sans serif, all uppercase lettering, and completed with intertwining thorns. There is a supplemental drawing depicting the proposed sign. The dimensions of the central window division are 23 inches tall by 40 inches wide on the additional supplemental, so the proposed graphics would fit that space. Provided graphics also indicate another proposed sign that measures 12 inches tall by 40 inches wide, also in white color. A supplemental hand sketch indicates this sign is centered vertically and horizontally within the main shop window. The sign includes the word Kings, King''S, in large, bold, stylized cursive, serif lettering, followed on the next line by expressions in large, all uppercase serif lettering. The dimensions of the shop window are 43 inches tall by 93 inches wide, at least according to the supplemental sketch, so the proposed graphics would fit. A clarification of the proposed material for both signs is warranted from the applicant before any kind of appropriateness can be determined. So I couldn't find anywhere beyond white of what the sign might be. I'm assuming it's a vinyl cutout, but for the certificate, we would need that clarification. The applicant should also confirm that the signage is installed on the inside glass surfaces. It wasn't clear to me from the application. Also, HCC traditionally encourages signage proposals to incorporate a pinstripe detail around any graphics to serve as a frame. Now, the round sign has kind of a frame by the lettering and the thorns, so I'm speaking specifically about the two lines of text. The applicant might want to consider a frame around that because even though it's not spelled out specifically in your guidelines, oftentimes HCC will recommend that. So those are my requests for clarification. What is the material? Confirm it's on the inside surface, and you as a body might request the frame around the lettering.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Jeff. So again, greetings and thank you again for coming. And, if you could just, confirm for us the materials of the sign.
Sure. So it will be white vinyl siding and it will be placed on the outside of the window.
Okay. And again, we always ask that be installed on the inside. Are you okay with that?
Yeah, we just thought the outside because when we removed the old one, it was on the outside. So we
Yeah.
thought, but we're okay with putting it on the inside.
Okay. And it will hold up better for you too that way.
Yes, I thought about that.
Okay. Do you have any issues with doing the pinstripe frame on the lower text the way Jeff was describing? It might need a little bit more detail, but I think usually we're looking for like a 1/2 inch thick kind of pinstripe that has a little bit of space
Would that be
around.
for this one?
Yeah, that's right. Mhm.
I just have one thought on that though. When looking at the picture Jeff provided, it does look like they're boxed out individually. No, like the transom has 3 boxes across the top, and
Yeah, correct.
the lower window already kind of has a box. I mean,
The lower window,
Yeah,
that's a
the frame of
signpost.
the window.
no, in the middle it's a signpost. Yeah, but I mean, it still like seems like it's boxed. You know what I mean?
So it might be kind of redundant in other
Frame of the
words.
window is sort of like a box that contains the logo. isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, like if it was a divided window or just one big bay window, I could see, but it kind of is a divided window. I either way, I'm just throwing that out there. It's
Yeah.
just-
I think also what's, well, it looks like what you're, just from this sketch here, I see you're trying to center it in the glass as opposed to what's there now, right?
Yes.
Just out of curiosity, what kind of business is this?
It will be a clothing store.
Oh, okay. Okay, very good. Any other comments or questions here?
Shade of white. Address that at all.
You have a particular-
Typically for exterior signage, we recommend a color that's slightly off white. Just because it doesn't show the dirt as much and so on, but this will be on the inside. Typically, a little bit warmer is more in keeping with the district, a little bit warmer white, not necessarily an ivory, but not a stark Arctic white.
Okay.
So if you have a choice in that,
Okay.
we would
How
recommend that.
how would you feel about maybe like a goldish color?
Fine.
I think it's just the concern is the bright white.
Yeah, we're just
No
concerned.
bright
with
Yeah, I
white.
just
So any
noticed
other
other
color?
Yeah, I was
businesses
just-
around,
yeah,
they
we
have
looked
a
over-
white, so
yeah.
then we thought maybe it has to be white.
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't
Um,
necessarily
yeah.
have to be white.
Okay,
Okay.
As long as it's not like bright glaring white, I think is the main concern.
okay, great.
I think maybe the only thing to keep in mind is, and you could kind of see it with what's there now, is generally white does read better behind glass or on glass. So, gold would probably look nice. It just probably wouldn't read as well.
Harder to read.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so just not bright white.
Yeah.
Or more
Yeah.
like an off-white.
Pretty much it.
That's fine.
Okay. Anybody able to make a motion on this?
I move that we recommend a certificate of appropriateness for the signage at 708 East 4th Street for the applied vinyl elements as depicted in the application, with the coloring to be an off-white.
Okay. Any direction on that pinstripe?
Up to the applicant.
Okay. That's true. Here's what we'll do. We have a motion on the floor, and maybe before we put it to vote, how about we have a second, and then we'll ask for public participation. Is there a second on this?
I'll second.
Okay, thank you. Any public comment on this? No? Okay, thank you. Let's put to vote. Craig Evans?
Aye.
I vote aye. Todd?
Aye.
Desiree?
I vote aye.
Mike?
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. So hopefully this was some helpful feedback for
Yeah,
you, and
definitely.
wishing you best for your new business.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.
Yep.
Okay, with that, we'll move to our second agenda item for the evening, which is 1304 Spring Street.
Put it in the record. Justin.
Oh, okay, and yeah, and really thank you for allowing us to switch it.
Tell them they're welcome to stay. They can leave.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's true. And Liz and LaFon, you know, you don't have to stick around if you don't want to. I mean,
Welcome to,
it's,
but-
More than
yeah,
welcome to.
you certainly are. I mean, it makes for some interesting viewing time, but
Thanks, Gary. They were here to support us.
of course. No, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Building description, period, style, and defining features. This, just a reminder, please sign in and print rather than signature, please. Thank you. This residential structure is a detached 2.5-story, 2-bay, wood frame, single-family dwelling with a front-facing gable with original slate roof shingles, projecting planar barge boards supported on wood brackets, wood shingle gable details, wood clapboard siding, and a full front porch with a hipped roof. Dating from circa 1885, this house is Queen Anne style. The applicant proposes to demolish the existing single-family dwelling and construct an approximately 41,000 square foot structure containing 4 dwelling units. This review is a continuation from the July 15, 2024 HCC meeting. Guideline citations I used for my assessment include the Bethlehem ordinance that Mr. Later read at the beginning of tonight's meeting, as well as the Historic Commission guidelines, Historic Conservation Commission design guidelines concerning demolition, and if you so desire, also about new construction. I just want to quote specifically from page 19. HCC encourages an evaluation of the significance of the building in the historic district, and all attempts to reuse the historic building have been exhausted prior to considering demolition, end quote. HCC will not recommend approval for demolition unless, quote, proposed demolition involves a non-significant building where the applicant has demonstrated that they have exhausted all other options and they will suffer undue economic hardship, end quote. And also concerning new construction, again, if you so desire, HCC encourages new construction that, quote, preserves the cohesive ambiance of the historic conservation district with compatible, sympathetic, and contemporary construction that matches the setbacks of the adjacent buildings on a streetscape and has compatible siding, proportion, size and scale, form, materials, fenestration, roof configuration, details, and finishes, end quote. My evaluation, the effects on the district and recommendations. The certificate of appropriateness application to demolish the existing historic structure and replace it with an open lawn was presented to HCC during a series of meetings in late 2012 through early 2013. Citing the high level of historical integrity of this contributing structure, as well as the concerns of demolition by neglect, and also supported by public comments about the applicant's lack of proper maintenance of this and other historic structures located on the former Grace Manor property, the HCC ultimately recommended that Bethlehem City Council deny the applicant's proposal. In February of 2013, consistent with HCC's recommendation, City Council denied the certificate of appropriateness application to demolish the existing structure. In late 2019, the applicant returned to the HCC with a certificate of appropriateness application to replace the existing slate roof sheathing with GAF slate line asphalt shingles. The HCC unanimously supported the applicant's proposal to maintain the existing historic structure by recommending that Bethlehem City Council approve the applicant's proposal. The city's council issued a resulting certificate of appropriateness to replace the existing slate with asphalt roof shingles in early December of 2019. A recent walk-by inspection of the property has confirms that the existing slate roof was never replaced. There was a certificate of appropriateness application dated May 30th, 24, that repeated the earlier proposal to demolish the existing historic structure, but this time to replace it with a much larger new structure. Because this dwelling was constructed circa 1885, it is considered contributing to the Mount Airy neighborhood district and is therefore significant. This structure also exhibits a high level of historical integrity and is part of a partial neighborhood block of similar 2.5-story single-family residential structures, all dating from roughly the same period, so its loss to demolition would be significant to the existing streetscape and also to the overall district. According to relevant design guidelines, the HCC does not recommend approval for demolition of significant structures. Rather, an evaluation of the building's significance within the district is encouraged, and confirmation is needed that all attempts to reuse the historic building are exhausted prior to considering demolition. If the HCC determines the applicant has satisfied the issue of the building's significance, and also that all attempts to reuse the historic structure are exhausted, the HCC may recommend demolition if the applicant will serve resulting undue economic hardship. During the HCC meeting on July 15, 2024, the applicant acknowledged that the existing dwelling was not inhabited for the last few years. Attempts to button up the structure included the recent certificate of appropriateness application to replace the existing slate roof, but the applicant noted that the effects of COVID pandemic prevented the installation of the work due to a lack of available contractors. The applicant called attention to a supplemental conditions assessment and property appraisal reports to confirm that the needed rehabilitation is well beyond the appraised value. The applicant continued that the rehabilitation of the existing structure affords no real use because of the small scale of the rooms and needed compromises to make it ADA compliant. The applicant continued that the existing structure has no significance to the neighborhood because it is located far from most other historic buildings within the boundaries of the district and does not satisfy the definition of a traditional Queen Anne style. The applicant concluded by explaining that attempts to rehabilitate the existing structure would cause undue financial hardship. In response, the HCC questioned the applicant's contention that the existing dwelling is not contributing to the district. The HCC also questioned the applicant's argument that rehabilitation of the existing historic structure is considered undue economic hardship, while the proposed new construction at an initial cost of around $2 million was not considered economic hardship. During the public commentary portion of the meeting, the existing dwelling was confirmed as originally intended for Mr. Grace's gardener and once included nearby greenhouses. Recollections about the applicant's previous proposal to demolish the existing structure were also shared, noting the applicant was already criticized then for attempting to demolish by neglect. Another member of the public questioned the applicant's claim that the existing structure is insignificant, noting the district includes not only mansions of former wealthy executives, but also homes of former common workers. Public comments concluded with the observation that this structure also has intrinsic historical significance for the former Grace Manor property. As a follow-up to the various comments, the HCC inquired if the applicant would be willing to explore design options that rehabilitate the existing historic structure while also including an appropriate new addition to address the proposed housing. The applicant was amenable to the HCC suggestion and agreed to return with revised design proposals based upon various comments. In response, the HCC unanimously tabled any decision to deny or support the proposed demolition until the requested design options would be presented for subsequent review. Rather than submitting a new certificate of appropriateness application with the requested design options to rehabilitate the existing structure in combination with an appropriate new addition, the applicant now stands by the previous certificate of appropriateness application and requests the HCC to comment on subsequent research into the structure's significance. Referencing the National Register of Historic Places nomination form that was in-stamped as received by the National Park Service on March 25th, 1988, that led to the successful designation of the Mount Airy National Register Historic District, the applicant calls attention to the accompanying map that delineates the proposed district. Within the district's boundaries, the 27 dwellings are indicated as, quote, contributing, while 2 are indicated as, quote, non-contributing. Though physically located within the proposed district boundaries, the applicant's property, along with several other similar historic structures facing Spring Street, are not depicted on that map. The accompanying narrative describes the 27 contributing structures within the proposed district, while both non-contributing structures are identified as, quote, 1970s ranch-style houses, end quote. Similar to the supplemental map, the applicant's property, along with several other historic structures facing Spring Street, are not included with that narrative. The applicant concludes these omissions support the claim that the existing structure is non-contributing, so discussion is warranted. Almost 20 years after the designation of the Mount Airy National Register Historic District by the National Park Service, the City of Bethlehem collaborated with the Pennsylvania Historical and Museum Commission in 2007 to establish the Mount Airy Neighborhood District as its newest historic conservation district. In response, the existing ordinance, i.e. the Article 1714, was amended to assign responsibility of assessing any certificate of appropriateness applications for proposed alterations within the newly created district to the HCC. The amended ordinance includes the boundary description of the new district that mirrors the boundary description within the National Register nomination from 20 years prior. However, individual structures are not indicated as either contributing or non-contributing. Article 1714 within the ordinance does not exempt structures within the district from COA or Certificate of Appropriateness review based on the grounds they are non-contributing. A discussion of whether structures are non-contributing or contributing may be relevant to whether the HCC does or does not recommend the application for the action proposed, but it has no bearing on whether the action is subject to review. Under Article 1714 and the Historic Districts Law, while demolition or construction work on particular structures within the district may be exempt from HCC review on other grounds, for example, if it's smaller than 100 square feet, or if it's not visible from the public right-of-way, the issue of contributing or non-contributing dichotomy is not one of those grounds. The Secretary of Interior standards, the city ordinance, and the accompanying design guidelines dating from 2007, in collaboration with the Pennsylvania Historical and Museum Commission, rather than the nomination form submitted to the National Park Service in 1918, serve as the basis for HCC's assessments of all Certificate of Appropriateness applications. Based on that understanding, the applicant's existing historic structure is considered significant, so its loss to demolition would be significant to the existing streetscape and also to the overall district. Secretary of Interior standards do not address the topic of demolition. So you as a commission, you have kind of three resources. You have the ordinance, Secretary of Interior standards, and then the design guidelines. Secretary of Interior standards assume no demolition ever. So it will never be quoted as one of your sources for assessment. So you're left with the ordinance and the guidelines. According to the relevant ordinance and the associated design guidelines, the HCC does not recommend approval for demolition of contributing structures. Rather, an evaluation of the building's significance within the district is encouraged, and confirmation is needed that all attempts to reuse the historic building have been exhausted prior to considering demolition. If the HCC determines the applicant has satisfied the issue of the building's significance and all attempts to reuse the historic structure are exhausted, the HCC may recommend demolition if it concludes the applicant will suffer resulting undue economic hardship.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. I feel like maybe there's two big things we should talk about. One is I feel like there's a difference between our understanding and your understanding of what makes it a contributing building. And then I think the second thing is the whole issue of economic hardship. So maybe we could start off by talking about that, and feel free to.
Sure. Is this working good? Can we just give you another position? Well, thanks. And a couple things I want to comment. First of all, I'm Sal Verastro with Spillman Farmer Architects.
And I'm Christopher Wharton with Spillman Farmer Architects.
Also with us, in case we need them, is Joseph Shadid and Randy Smith with Holy Family Senior Living, where the property exists. Oh, sure. I'll have them sign in. Sure. So a couple things. I do have some notes here I want to emphasize, but one thing that Jeff said that I just want to make sure you understand, the loss of the building, he said, would impact the area, and that's true if it wasn't replaced. That's important, and we're not suggesting you tear it down and leave it. We're suggesting it would only be torn down after you approve the replacement. So let's get that on the table and be clear about that. So thanks for your time, and I appreciate Jeff's summary. And I'd like to summarize our position, which I think is what you kind of led to, Gary, a little bit. But our original position and from the original submission has not changed with respect to our belief and our request for demolition of the structure. And here's a summary. So at our initial submission, we showed you evidence from the original historic, when the original historic commission was formed, that this building was not, and I disagree respectfully with Jeff, it was not contributing structure within the district. In fact, it was not shown on the original submission for a reason on the map. It was not also included in the, as Jeff said, in the count of the number of buildings proposed in the district. That's a fact, and there's a reason for that. And we do know, though, factually, that the home of this building was for the gardener for Mr. Eugene Grace, which Jeff alluded to, which doesn't make it historic from a personal perspective. There's no question about that, and we're not denying that. But your own guidelines exempt this structure from being judged on that aspect as to who lived there, and only to be judged on architectural significance. These are facts and are undisputable. In addition, we discovered some additional supporting evidence to support that. And I'm going to ask Krista just to go through that for a second, okay?
Yeah, so I just, I know Jeff mentioned that that Holy Family presented the proposal to demolish 1304 Spring Street back in 2012 and early 2013. And actually in early 2013, when Holy Family brought the proposal to demolish 1304 Spring Street to HCC here, the historic officer at the time, his name was Mr. Donovan. I believe his first name was George. But his opinion was that he actually did not have an issue with the house being demolished. This was noted in the denial of the certificate of appropriateness for demolition from January 28th, 2013. And then also Holy Family then went to City Council in February of 2013, where the attorney for Holy Family noted the historic officer, Mr. Donovan, noted that he didn't feel demolition of 1304 Spring Street would have any impact on the neighborhood itself. So, that was captured in both the denial of the certificate of appropriateness for demolition, and then also in the city council meeting minutes from February 2013. Both of those are available on the city's website.
Thanks, Chris. So these aspects, which I mentioned and Chris mentioned, alone support our position that even the founders of this historic district submission did not believe that this particular building was architecturally contributing based on your own guidelines. Our contention was and is that under your guidelines, this building shouldn't even be considered as an architecturally contributing structure. At the last meeting, as Jeff mentioned, it was determined by this board that you would get legal advice from the board's attorney. And it's my understanding, you correct me if I'm wrong, that the attorney deemed that it was, since it was within the historic district guideline boundaries, it was your prerogative as this board whether or not to review the submission, not to say it was architecturally significant or appropriate or contributing. That's not what the attorney said, to my understanding. So you have to consider it, and that's fine if you want to consider it within the district, but he did not, or he or she did not consider it a contributing building.
Mr. Vash,
Sure.
if I can just, since I'm the attorney.
Oh, good.
Just, I'm here for one purpose and one purpose only, because there was some confusion about the nature of your submission, the arguments you were raising.
Sure.
It's the city's position when we review the ordinance and the historic districts law, that regardless of what happened in 1988 regarding the federal registry, when we look at our ordinance, we're concerned about what falls within the maps.
Agreed.
Okay. So you're not contending that your proposed demolition is somehow exempt from COA review, correct?
Originally we were, because it wasn't originally submitted that way. But as Jeff said, I guess there was language in there that everything in the boundaries was, I'll say, fair game. But it wasn't originally intended. So what we were trying to prove, attorney, is that that it was even the original delineation of all the buildings within those boundaries. It was not in the original count. It was obviously there, but they felt it wasn't contributing, so they didn't include it in the count. But it still ended up in the boundaries. I'm not contesting that they shouldn't review this. So what I'm saying is they didn't believe it was contributing building. That's all we were contending.
Okay. And like I said, I'm not a historic
Sure.
architectural guy. So if your argument is that because the building was not included in the 1988 historic registry application, and that's somehow relevant to whether or not this board should recommend demolition, I mean, that's fair game to make.
Yep.
I'm not saying
Agreed.
however which way they should rule on that, but okay. But we there's no dispute that the building itself, its demolition, is subject to review by this board.
Based on your opinion, correct. And that's all I was saying, but you certainly didn't express your belief that it was contributing.
Correct. I mean, that's not my call.
That's exactly right. That's what I'm saying. I just didn't want the board to be confused by that. Thank you. I appreciate that. And I understand that completely. So let me just conclude here. Holy Family Senior Living manages the structure. The existing structure, while in stable condition, is at the moment, it's not inhabitable. It's uninhabitable. The building's in very poor condition with respect to restoring it. It would cost an exorbitant amount of money just to restore it to its existing condition and finishes. That in itself is an economic hardship. This would not make the building habitable because of all the existing code issues that we need to overcome, a further cost. Even with that, the existing layout is not sufficient to be used as a residence, which is the only possible need for Holy Family Senior Living. It's got small corridors, small bedrooms. I think Jeff mentioned it, the small toilet rooms, they would not be code compliant. Listen, we as architects have a responsibility to be good stewards of any architecture, and especially buildings of this age. We don't take this lightly. This was not an easy thing for us to do. The option to demolish a building is a last resort for us. We do look at, regardless of what this board says, we look at all the possible avenues to save it, reuse it, repurpose it, renovate it, whatever it takes. But we've exhausted all those economic options because it's just not usable to Holy Family Senior Living as is. And the funding would be an economic hardship Do I have the exact numbers with me? No, but I gave you some originally. Jeff said something that disturbed me, is that he mentioned that they have the money to tear it down and rebuild a $2 million structure. Yeah, but the return on investment, you got to calculate that into it.
Clarification, I was quoting from HCC.
You were, I
It's
understand.
It's not my words.
Okay. So it's not economically salvageable for them. However, since our last meeting, I met with Mary Toulouse, I think is how you pronounce her last name, who's a member of the district. She reached out to me through Gary, and I appreciate that. So we had a nice conversation. She's very nice. We understood each other's position. We talked about, she's a resident of the district, and she's a vocal supporter of saving the buildings. No question about it. We had a nice conversation. And I very much appreciated her passion for saving this particular building, and I'm sympathetic to her. The residents of the district believe that this house is important because who lived there specifically. Therefore, we have a little compromise, maybe from our perspective. Actually, Mary mentioned if we could, which we've done before, salvage some architectural element on the building and replicate it into the new building. We don't see anything on the building that is architecturally significant that we can mimic or copy or save. But exploring the possibilities is still not out of the question. And if Jeff has a suggestion, we're happy to entertain it. But we do have a suggestion. And I talked to this about Mary. We're suggesting that Holy Family, part of the new construction, would be to install a historic plaque or marker inside or outside the building where the building once stood, and delineated the importance of the building in history. You have handouts, right?
Yeah, I do actually.
But we can, we have just an example of the historic signs around the state of Pennsylvania that we're suggesting. So the history of the building is not lost completely.
Thank you.
We were both looking at the same thing, so two different signs. We're happy to answer any questions.
Well, one thing I wanted to talk about, in looking over your submission and, thinking about how you presented this project last time, it seems that your focus has been on the significance of the building as being, Queen Anne style. And well, after all, it's not really that much Queen Anne style. It's not really that significant of a house. And, I've always felt that our commission looks at things a little bit differently. We talk a lot about how the buildings relate to the streetscape and how buildings contribute to the overall feel of the community and the neighborhood. And we do that by the scale of the building and by other architectural elements. I took a closer look at that neighborhood yesterday, and there's several houses along that street, maybe 3 or 4. You could see while they're kind of different stylistically, I could see they all kind of present themselves in a similar scale, maybe 2.5 stories. I would say, as Jeff alluded to, they follow similar setbacks. There's just something I would say, even though there's only these 3 or 4 houses there, that I would say, yeah, there's kind of a look and feel about this neighborhood. And I feel that's really the sort of thing that we're more concerned with, rather than, well, is this a typical Queen Anne mansion? And so I thought it's important to talk about that it's not really just about the house or just about what happened there. I think really what we're trying to do here is preserve the feel of neighborhoods. I think I would like to hear a little bit more conversation on that and feedback from the other board commission members. But before we do, I think I'd also like to hear more about the big picture with your proposal. So, yeah, I think the nice thing that Holy Family is, I mean, the admirable thing that Holy Family is trying to propose here is it seems like it's 4 new units for senior housing.
It's 4 new units. I'm going to ask Joe here.
Okay.
Specifically for seniors?
Yeah, affordable housing,
The f-
small units, and if possible, we can make it 6, maybe so.
So he's saying a minimum of 4 units for affordable housing for seniors.
Okay, and that's of course very important too. I mean, often we don't really talk that much about the economic constraints and so on, but I think it's worthwhile for us just to know what your proposal is going to be offering because that's important too. Any other thoughts or comments from the commission members?
And sort of in reference to what you were saying, Gary, there are several other buildings or houses along Spring Street that not just in that block, and they're not within the district per se, but they're in that neighborhood that still have a very similar feel to that house. And I feel like that does help, make a cohesive, feeling of the neighborhood. So it's not just those 3 houses that are right next to it or 2 houses that are right next to the one that you guys want to demo. It is also other houses in Spring Street that are very similar in their style and how they present to the street. So I think that does lend to having, more character and also reason for why they are what they are.
Can I just add to both those comments? So getting back to what you said, and it's Desiree, right?
Yeah.
Suggested. So first of all, whatever is replaced with this building, if we're successful, would have to come through this board, right? So you would have a second bite at the apple regardless of what we're doing here. But I think we gave you early on some idea of where we were headed with this thing. What we tried to do, we purposely went around the entire neighborhood, even outside the district, Desiree's point, and looked at the buildings. And rather than pick out one style, we're going to try to stick with one style, not make a hodgepodge out of it, but find common ones that were similar in the neighborhood. Or ones that you would feel appropriate. If you feel that going back with a straight Queen Anne is the most appropriate thing, that's fine. And we don't have a problem with that. We looked at a couple possibilities, but we weren't suggesting that it should it's 5 stories or anything like that. We would stay within the 2.5 stories. Actually, it's a 2-story proposal. Building, yes, it would be larger in the horizontal dimension, but certainly not in the vertical dimension. But I appreciate the comment. I know there's buildings outside the district that are probably as contributing as the ones that are in the district.
I think the main thing you probably need from us to move forward is I think somehow this commission has to come up with either a reason that we feel, okay, back to the beginning, is this a contributing structure? And is there a real economic hardship here to do something else with it? And so, I think number one, I think I'd like to hear from other commission members about that, and see if we could get to a comfort level.
And if there's any public comment.
Sure. I think
Do you want our positions first, or do you?
yeah, I do. I think we should have our full discussion before we have the public comment.
Well, if what Mr. Verastra says is correct, I believe, holding off or waiting until we see what's going to replace it. If we're going to, just so we're aware of what is going to replace it, not that it comes back in front of us, but I see no need to hurry with a demolition approval or denial ahead of seeing a subsequent project that we're going to all agree upon fits the landscape and the core of the street.
Okay.
I'd like to defer to the council we have in front of us because according to the ordinance, that those are two solely, completely independent concepts. You've in the past put caveats on your certificates to approve demolition that it must go through reviews. That's correct. But if I understand the ordinance correctly, you can't make demolition specifically conditional upon that.
Okay.
And secondly, the applicant is returning for the second time with their existing or original certificate of appropriateness application. And again, I turn to the solicitor, but I understand correctly, if I understand correctly, you actually are required to either approve or deny at the second meeting. But
Okay.
I'd like to hear from him to
Thank you.
make sure that my understanding is correct.
Right, Jeff, do you know where it says that in the ordinance, rather than every page through it?
I have to ask, is that, Jeff, are you saying that they cannot do that, or is it's not recommended? Because we would be amenable to that condition.
I think we have had situations where if the applicant was amenable,
Oh,
we waive
absolutely.
that. So yeah,
I'm sorry. That's what I thought.
I
Okay.
had the impression you were pushing for it, so that's why I put that on the table. So
I mean, we would certainly, well, let me just say, I'm sure that the owner would be amenable to that. I'm positive with that. Second, as an architect, I would rather you do that, because I'm not going to come in here with a vinyl sided building that's 10 stories tall, right? I'm not going to do that.
Won't get out of here.
Exactly. So why would we even do that? So obviously we want to come in, like as I said, we're sympathetic to the district. So we would definitely do that.
I'll say, from my perspective, I'm a little frustrated with this application and this process. I feel like we had good conversation at the last meeting, and we outlined a path forward for you to come back and show us, how you've looked at other options. And I don't see any of that. And that, that's fine. That's just the way it unfolded. I would have liked to have some supporting evidence that there's no other option for this structure. I do understand, seeing the pictures and everything, that it's fallen into disrepair. I'm also frustrated with the owner that it's gotten to this state and that we're forced to make a decision based on demolishing this because it's been neglected. I don't think that's a fair process for anybody. And it's a very difficult position to be in, if I'm being honest, sitting on this board. I do see that.
Just a quick input. I only been there for 5.5 years.
Yeah, I get it. I get
what you're
it.
saying.
Things change,
Yeah,
you know.
do change.
Yeah, you inherited the problem, but I'm just voicing our frustration from this side of the table. Being in the profession that I'm in, I see your challenges with repurposing the structure and the condition that it's in. And again, you inherited this issue, so.
So that should ease your frustration, Todd.
You've sat over here too, and you've been through
Sure.
it. So yeah, you get it. To me, whether who lived in it is kind of immaterial. I know it bears, local significance. To me, the fact that it's not a model Queen Anne doesn't, have a lot of significance. Just the fact that it's within the district and we're charged with protecting the district is all I need to hear. But I guess I'd like to hear from other people on the board and understand, what the public has to say about it. And I think we can make a good and responsible decision moving forward.
I think the importance of any conservation district that has a boundary is that whatever's in it falls to be judged as part of the district. And certainly with the South Side District, we don't have defined, individual buildings. It's a boundary within which we work. So the same, in my opinion, is true of the Mount Airy District. If it falls within the boundary, it's subject to review. And if this fell on the other side of the street, you wouldn't be here. That's just how it is. So we have to look at it from that standpoint. The fact that it had some connection to the Grace enclave is historically interesting.
That's relevant, but I don't.
Lends some credibility to the merit of the building. It's typical of what would happen with other workers. And there's certainly sufficient situation in historic areas where the workers' houses are just as important as the lead name. So the fact that it's not Queen Anne or completely Queen Anne, or that it wasn't listed in, doesn't mean a whole lot. We're talking here, in my opinion, again, how it fits with the neighborhood and what elements are going to be there. A replacement as proposed has certainly a different scale. And I think that's something that bothers me a little bit. I'm not sure just how to deal with that, but I'm not an architect either.
Well, I think they're going to give us the
Yeah.
ability to deal with that, right? That's part of your proposal.
Sure,
Yeah.
would have to be.
Yeah.
That's part of the historical
that's-
significance.
What gives me some pause at this point is the replacement as depicted in the speculative concept design doesn't really fit. And I'm not sure how to deal with that, but it doesn't fit the ambiance of the neighborhood at that point.
But I, based on what I'm hearing from Sal and Chris, they're going to bring us or give us the opportunity to review the design and dovetail it with the neighborhood, right?
Correct. Now, I will say we're not going to, we have to stick to no more than 2.5 stories, which is what's there now. Like I said, the horizontal dimension is the one that's going to be impacted a little bit. And also, Craig, I want to just make sure you understand, we are not suggesting that you did not have the right to judge this project. What I was trying to do is convince you that there are people before us here that did not feel it was contributing structure. That's what I was trying to convince you of. And that's really where we started, and that's where we'll end.
I
and you-
will accept that.
No. And we can professionally disagree with these, I'm sure.
Okay. So in a nutshell, Craig, you feel it's a contributing building.
I do.
I think last time there was some discussion about possibly locating it in a different spot on the property, and that, that's quite a large side lot next to this house on Spring Street. Have you guys entertained any ideas of putting a structure on that property next to the house?
We did look at that. It's a fair question, but again, what happens to 1304 Spring Street? It's unusable,
It gets maintained because it's a historic building.
economically unfeasible, unfortunately.
Did I understand it correctly that it was approved to be demoed in 2013? Was that what you had said, Chris?
No, it was denied.
Oh, okay.
The demolition was denied. It was the historic officer at the time had no issue with the
I
demolition.
see. So, but the board denied it. Okay.
Right. I think it was like a 4-3 vote. I think
Okay.
3
And then
people
why
supported
didn't the
demolition.
slate roof get replaced? Anybody know?
Why didn't it?
Yeah.
That's a
at the
good
time in
question.
which
That
it
was before
approved to get
me.
replaced.
I think what I heard, and I heard this twice, so Jeff reaffirmed it was right before COVID, and I think it got approved in 19. COVID hit in 20, so I think, I'm not sure exact date, but I think that prohibited them from moving forward with it. But then there was a transition in leadership, so.
Oh, I see. Because there was a very large roof replaced in the neighborhood that's actually in the district that took place during COVID.
Jim Carvey.
And so there wasn't like a real big lull of contractors who couldn't have done it. There was
But-
certainly somebody who got a very nice roof replaced during COVID in the neighborhood.
But I think the roof was repaired, though. It was not replaced, but
Oh, no, I'm talking about not in Holy Family Manor.
Oh,
I'm
no,
talking
no,
about a
I- no,
different-
no.
They completely replaced the shingled
Sure.
cedar sided or cedar roof on like 15th and Prospect.
I don't know that it had anything to do with workforce or anything like that. I thought it was economic. That's what I had heard prior to Jeff's comments, but
So there were people still working
Oh,
during
yeah.
COVID is all I was trying to point out. But it doesn't, the roof not getting repaired when it could have been, would always help the structure maintain.
We did
It-
repair the roof.
yeah, they
you
repaired it.
did?
They didn't replace it.
Oh, okay, I thought,
I looked at it and I wanted to fix it. And then I repaired the roof, then COVID hit, so we were in survival mode for a while,
I
like
see.
any other healthcare facility.
Right.
It's
Right.
skilled nursing facility and nursing homes. And when we went back to look at it, we did do an assessment. It was a lot of money to fix.
Mhm.
And that's when the economic hardship and so on. It just doesn't pay anything to fix it. It's like you
Yeah.
explained.
I understand.
Just to be clear, I think the series of events was that they came in and asked for the use of slate line, similar looking shingles, we all know that, of slate, and that was approved, but because of the course of, and maybe it's economic, I don't know when Mr. Shadid showed up, but it sounded like they couldn't afford even that, so they repaired the existing issues with slate. They went back and it was I saw the repairs, they're on the northwest side of the building.
Oh, okay.
But it was just on one side. Then they did just slate repairs.
Oh,
So it was repaired. It is watertight right now.
Okay. Well, that's good.
Mr. Grassroot, so, I mean, the application before the HCC is for demolition only. So as I understand it, you're saying that you would make any approval of that contingent upon the HCC approving the replacement structure, right?
That is exactly true. I didn't know we could submit it other than, I submitted for approval based on what we thought would be conditional. We said that in the original submission, that no demolition will be done until the board approves a new replacement. And the demolition would occur under the same contract as the new construction, not before.
I guess, given that, does it not make more sense, since you have to be assured of, well, not HCC's, but ultimately council's approval of a COA to construct whatever building you'll be proposing in its place, to combine your request for the demolition COA along with the request for the new building COA? I don't know what, I mean, if the idea here is that you're requesting that the HCC recommend approval of a COA to demolish contingent upon some plan that really hasn't been presented yet, I mean, you're just kind of kicking the can down the road to get to the point where you'd be presenting that replacement building anyway, right?
This is true, but I think, Jeff, you'll have to step in here. I didn't think that was even possible, but I could be wrong.
Well, I guess, I mean, you and the board can agree, for example, to extend that 60-day period to render a decision or render a recommendation. I mean, if the board in its discretion wants to do that, I guess all I'm saying is that, I mean, you could come in and just ask for a demolition and you would be left with empty grass at the end of that. Obviously, that's not what you're doing.
Correct.
And given what you seem to be ultimately requesting, it's a demolition and replacement. And I think it's tough to make a decision about recommending demolition until the HCC knows what the replacement is. And this is this is not me putting my thumb on the scale in any way. Just logistically, if that's what you're proposing, kind of a conditional demolition COA, and you're acknowledging that you're going to replace what's there with the new building, it would seem to make sense that before the HCC would consider the demolition, it should know what the building's going to look like. I know you've, I guess, presented renderings, but the application itself that's before us is just for demolition.
That is correct. So I'll offer this. The fear is that we come in with a full proposal and we're denied demolition regardless, and that cannot happen. And that's the reason I was told that we have to ask for demolition first before we proceed. You can understand the owner's dilemma.
I understand what you're saying, but just kind of reverse engineer that.
Sure.
You're in the same situation anyway. If this board were to say, we'll recommend a demolition COA contingent upon you presenting an acceptable
Sure.
construction COA, you're in that same place where you come back before the board on a second occasion, and they could, for example, recommend against the construction COA, and council could vote to deny the construction COA. So I think you put yourself in the same position that you would be in if you just decided to combine the demolition and construction request. That's all I'm saying. I think it would be more procedurally proper to do so, and I don't think it leaves you any worse off.
Yeah. Mhm.
Fair enough.
One question I have before we go into public comment, is it feasible to gut the existing building and turn it into two units, a first floor and a second floor? I believe that as a two-family, it wouldn't have any ADA requirements, but I wanted to hear if that's something you had explored or looked into.
We did look at it, but the cost, and you have to remember, building is uninsulated. The electric there's no mechanicals. I mean, it would have to be totally gutted right down to the bare stud. The cost was exorbitant.
Mhm.
The per square foot cost based compared to a new structure it's probably almost doubled.
Yeah, that always surprises me because, you would think, hey, half the battle is getting the foundation and the shell in place. And, understood there's a lot of costs in
Well,
upgrading a building.
To add to that, I'm sorry, Todd, I was talking to Mary about this. The exterior wood siding is covered with lead paint.
Mhm.
And that would have to be stripped off or re-sided. So you're basically building a new structure.
And lead abatement is not easy to do, especially on
Correct.
demolition.
Correct.
Demoing a property.
So you either have to abate the lead or remove the siding totally.
Yeah, I'm surprised there's not, in this day and age, like some kind of coating that encapsulates this, no?
Yeah, but look at the pictures. The condition of it is
Already
so
flaking
bad.
out.
You have to strip it away, all the paint, right?
Mhm. Public comment? Please come up to the podium and announce your name.
My name is, can you hear me?
Yes.
My name is Marcia Fritz. I live at 818 West Market Street. Therefore, I'm in the Mount Airy neighborhood community. I was, until recently, chair of HARB. And I recall how easy it is to get off track in conversations and analysis of any issue, not just housing. And I think that this discussion has been veering very close to getting totally off track. And I don't mean that as a criticism of any, we're all human. We all do this. But I think it's time to refocus on the building. There's been a lot of conversation about whether or not it's contributing. That's irrelevant, and I'll get to the reason why in a bit. This building is a record of its time and place, and you all know that phraseology. It speaks to the time before the oligarchs of Bethlehem Steel moved to the north side to get away from the stench of the south side. Good for them. They managed to create a later community that is interesting and important. However, that doesn't mean that the buildings that were there before aren't significant. In fact, they're very significant. They give historical context to the south, to the west side of Bethlehem that we know now and value. I went by this house again today, and I took a little time to review it as an architectural historian because that's my background too. It's a very nicely proportioned vernacular Queen Anne's period house. That's not to denigrate it at all. It's a very nice example of its time. It has lovely detailing. It raises a lot of questions about why it was built there, who lived there, and why it was put on the particular piece of property that it was. Was it before the west side of Bethlehem was completely laid out? Was it a farmhouse? The answer to those questions tell us about the history of Bethlehem. And that, after all, is why we're all here. In addition, there are many buildings in Bethlehem of about its same age. You know, the third, fourth quarter of the 19th century. But there are very, very few of its type. Simply detailed frame buildings. In other communities, there are tons of them. There are not a lot of them here. I think that if we lose this building, the answers that to the question that the existence of the building asks will be forever lost. We will have lost a piece of Bethlehem's history. That's not what's supposed to be happening. We don't know a lot about the history of this building, but we do know about the recent history, and it's sad. One of the world's richest institutions has acquired this property, among others, and has clearly devoted itself to demolition by neglect. Willfully. And now the applicants come to us and they say, it's too late, or it's got too much lead paint, or the plumbing and the electricity would have to be replaced. Yeah, that's what restoration architects like me do for a living. And furthermore, they're just plain wrong. Here's the reasons. They cite the National Trust's recognition initially 30 years ago of this parcel of property being significant. Now, 30 years ago, we were putting places on the National Register because they belong to the rich and famous. We've learned something in 30 years. Perhaps these gentlemen haven't noticed. I'm sure they have. But we're beginning to broaden our view of history. South Bethlehem's existence as a protected area demonstrates that. 30 years ago, nobody cared about South Bethlehem. A lot of other things they didn't care about either, like Black history. I have a little brief tale to tell you. About the time I was in architecture school, I went to visit a well-known 18th century parcel that belonged to somebody who was rich and famous. And the tour guide came in to me and she apologized to me. She said, oh, there's that ugly log building out there in our beautiful front lawn. We haven't gotten around to demolishing it yet. Well, they were slave quarters. And we wouldn't even think about that now. And that's why citing this 30-year-old pat on the back from the National Trust means nothing. It's out of date. I looked at the house again today, and you know, it's not too bad. In fact, it's not as bad as the house that I bought for $45,000 in Maryland, restored and sold later for $470,000. It's probably $700,000 now. Economics changes We all know that, but that's absolutely relevant to this particular building right now. By the way, Meals and Man didn't have a foundation. This does. In closing, I want to just reiterate that while the National Trust recognition is just a pat on the back, that's all it is. You operate under a system of laws. This building, whether somebody wants to define it as contributing or significant or pretty or useless or whatever, under this ordinance 1714.04.Q, wherein any and all changes in buildings, structures, or appurtenances visible from a public way are subject to review and approval by council, with you advising them. I urge you to deny demolition for this project. In fact, Mary Toulouse called me and asked me to come tonight because she couldn't make it here. This is the wrong direction for you all. It's the wrong direction for Holy Family Manor. As a citizen of Bethlehem, it's just wrong. Please deny demolition.
Thank you, Marcia. Okay, any other comments from the public? Okay. Do we feel we have enough conversation on this to make a motion? And is there someone willing to make that motion?
Before we get to that point,
Yes.
in deference to the due process rights of the applicant, I mean, what I said before is, are you interested in postponing the demolition request until you present a replacement construction proposal?
I want to answer that carefully, Counselor. I'd say yes.
Trap you or
No,
trigger it.
yes, you are. No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. I just want to, I guess, I want to be sure that if we bring something in that's you feel as a board is appropriate
Hmm,
and significant, that you would approve it.
Well, again,
That's a good question.
that's why, like, I would never presume to speak to that. I'm not going to speak for the board.
Understood.
All I'm saying is, I don't see how you're in any different position if you request something tonight that's only contingent upon you coming back later and getting approval.
If,
I get it if you were just looking to do the demolition. Then you're here tonight, you get the up or down recommendation, you go before council for the same issue.
fair enough.
But if you're doing a demolition and replacement construction, I don't know how you assess those unless you do it together. And I don't know how it benefits you to bifurcate them the way that you're apparently doing. That's just I don't think anyone wins or loses if you just address both the issues at the same time.
And again, it was our understanding that we could not do what you just suggested, but we're fine with that.
I mean, to the attorney's point, I think there is some problematic circumstances for the owner, right? And maybe I shouldn't be pointing this out on this side of the table, but I think it's important for all of us to consider. You want to know one way or the other whether there's a possibility to demolish this, because you don't want to invest the costs to design a replacement structure unless you have a positive feeling, right?
I believe that's correct.
Mhm, mhm.
That's what I'm getting from some of the conversation that come to pass.
I mean, what it sounds like is you're seeking tonight kind of an approval for or a recommendation to approve demolition, kind of contingent upon a sense of the HCC that they kind of sort of would approve the replacement structure. I don't know that that's really an option. I think that's why I'm suggesting I do think you kind of need the fully thought out replacement proposal to be considered along with the demolition proposal, because I don't think you can do it halfway.
Okay.
I think if you get the demolition tonight and it's contingent upon some future construction proposal, you're always going to run the risk that you bring it before this body and they recommend against that proposal. I mean, so that's why I don't think you're any better or worse off by considering both at the same time. I think if this were just a demolition, then you would hear it tonight and they would vote on it tonight. But I think a demolition along with a replacement structure, it just makes sense to do it at the same time. And I assume, I mean, again, I'm here infrequently only if there's a legal issue. I assume that's been done before, right? People want to tear down a building and put up a replacement, and they come in with a kind of a unified proposal. Yes?
Yeah.
And the reason that is the case is that we as a board took a position, having been burned by a couple of vacant lots where demolition was approved on a speculative basis for some replacement, which has yet to happen. We're into double-digit years for some of them. And as a board, we are not content having sections of streetscapes with vacant property. So, yeah, we have taken that position.
It makes, just again, not speaking as to the merit, it just makes more procedural and logistical sense to me. They paid this. No, you don't do it until the permit approved.
Right.
So there's no fee.
No.
Oh, that's totally.
There's no.
I was just saying, they could just, I presume, like, I guess they can just amend this current one. when they-
Yeah, or if we deny this one.
I guess you. Okay. Well, I mean, they could decide to withdraw.
So I don't know if this is a conversation at that end that we should all hear, but
Okay, yeah, sorry, all I was saying to Mr. Simonson was that, I think Mr. Verasso was talking to his client. Sorry, would it make sense, because there's no submission or filing fee associated with the HCC application? I mean, is there interest in just withdrawing that, as we say, in court without prejudice, to resubmit when you want to have when you have the unified demolition and construction proposal?
Yeah, I have no objection to that at all.
Right. So in that case, there'd be no vote tonight. You would just agree to withdraw the application and then resubmit it, and would go through review at that time.
Sure.
my feeling is, yeah, I mean, if I was in Sal's shoes, I guess I would want some feeling from us that if we at all be willing to consider that. I don't know.
Well, I mean, he has the absolute right to withdraw the application. I
Oh,
guess
sure.
if you'd like to give some feedback about whether there's any universe in which you would recommend demolition, I suppose, I mean, you can have that discussion. That's not for me to say yay or nay. But if, again, I think procedurally speaking, it makes the cleanest sense if they're going to pursue a unified demolition construction proposal to withdraw this current application and resubmit it when you have the demolition and construction plan in place.
Okay.
If you want to poll us, you can do that.
I would like to. Craig, informal,
Informal poll, but poll nonetheless.
right,
I would vote against demolition.
okay.
On a straw poll, I would vote against demolition.
Okay. I would too, and one reason is I do feel it's a contributing building to the district, and I'm not convinced that it is economically unfeasible to repurpose it. Yeah, expensive, definitely, but Todd?
Yeah, I'm torn. I based on the evidence and the pictures that you've seen or you've shown us of the condition and the cost estimate that I think is fairly well developed for rehabbing it, I do see that there is a potential economic hardship. And I think with the proper design considerations, I could approve moving forward with a project that includes demolition. But I'm torn.
Mhm. Desiree?
I'm inclined to deny the approval for demolition. I live in the neighborhood. I run past this house almost every day, and it's a very nice, quiet streetscape. And, I wouldn't want to clutter up the street with more parking or more people milling about. It's a shame that the house is in disrepair. I would love to see it being brought to life again and having people living in it again. That would be my goal. I like to see, properties, and I understand this is on a commercial lot, so that makes it complicated. I love to see families moving into homes and renovating them and making them their own. But this isn't the project that you're presenting. I don't particularly like the project you are presenting visually. And so, but I live in a historic building and I live in a historic house in the West Side, and I really understand the value of having those homes in the district and telling the story. Our property got changed drastically, and our house doesn't face the street that it is located on, and it's a part of its story. We would love to have that street run right in front of our house again, but it doesn't, and that's part of its story. And I think that's where I fall on the not demoing it. But I honestly, I don't know if it's just going to be left to fall to crumble, that's not a great solution either. So I'm definitely torn.
And Mike?
Yep. Yeah, I'm probably in a similar situation to the rest of the board members here. I'm kind of stuck in the middle on this one. It is in poor condition. I don't like to see vacant properties, obviously, in the city of Bethlehem, especially in the historic district, let alone I do say this is a contributing structure to the district as it lands in the middle of the Mount Airy guidelines. So with that being said, I mean, I wouldn't be necessarily. I don't know what I would be for or against. I mean, I at our previous meeting when we discussed this, we discussed potentially saving some of the building and maybe doing an addition or a partial demolition. So I would really have to see the next phase of this project as to what is being presented and if there is a replacement that's valuable or up to the level of the historic district that's the structure that's there. So I would have to see the replacement structure before I could be honest.
Okay.
On which way I'd go with it.
So that gives you some feedback to work with. The other thing I'd like to say is, I keep wishing that these renderings would show some context and even the floor plans. I wish I could see some of the site and how. I mean, it's maybe a little bit irrelevant now, but I feel like it's been missing from the overall presentation. And then the last thing I thought I would offer to Holy Family is, I've come across, it seems like there's a number of different grants that are out there to help with offsetting some of the cost of the work on that existing building. I think some of them might be through SBDC. I think that's, or I don't know if I got the initials right. I think it's Community Block Development Grant, something like that.
Yep. CDBG.
Thank you. Okay. Bad with the acronyms,
That's
but
okay.
just throwing it out there that might be worth looking into to help you along. So I don't know if we necessarily need a motion at this point.
Well, so in light of the straw poll, I think we request either approval or denial. We would like a vote.
Okay, I think that's fair enough.
In that case, Mr. Barrasso, just so we can clarify what the vote would be. Again, the application itself is just an application for demolition of the structure. Is that what you're seeking the vote on?
That is correct.
So just for the board's edification, it would just be a vote to recommend
Okay,
or not recommend demolition of the structure.
okay,
And if I might add to that, you are also, if anyone who votes to deny has to give reason or clarification how the applicant could reverse your denial. That has to be included into the
Hmm, okay.
certificate,
Hmm.
what I put forth to city council.
Okay. So I'll put forward a motion to deny the application for 1306 Spring Street, to deny the application for demolition based on that it is a contributing structure, both in terms of the architecture and in terms of the history associated with the building. And I feel that if the applicant came forward with a study that showed how the project is, how the project can be either reused, rehabilitated, maybe added on to, I would, consider the, a partial demolition. Any second on that long-winded motion?
Yeah, I'd like to add to the motion
Sure.
if I can. I think that if we had seen a study that proved to us that demolition of this structure was the only solution for this project, that would have made a difference.
Okay,
And with that, is that a second?
Yes.
okay.
And Mr. Later, you would amend your original motion to include the comments raised in the second?
I would amend it thus. Thank you.
Thank you.
So let's put it to a vote. Craig Evans?
This is I as
We're
against
voting to
demolition.
deny, yes.
Yeah, motion.
Yeah.
Okay. And because it's a contributing structure within the Mount Airy district, and it's based solely on the idea of demolition. I think if there's a subsequent application for demolition, it will include some sort of replacement.
Well, I think that's different from the motion I was making. So if
Yea or
vote
nay?
against my motion and you'd like to make a new one, that's fine too.
No.
Okay,
I vote to deny the demolition
okay,
because it's a contributing structure.
okay. I vote aye.
Aye.
Desiree?
I do.
Yeah, I.
Mike, okay, all right, so the motion carries, and I feel we've given you sufficient feedback.
Thank you.
Thank you too for your efforts. Thank you. Has approval of the minutes?
And we didn't do it yet.
Okay, well, can anybody make a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting.
Second?
Okay,
Oh, aye.
Aye.
aye. Okay.
Motion carries.
Any old business? Any new business? It's a new year. Yes.
It's not for the minutes, but I did see everyone was copied on the communication that Darlene Heller is entering retirement the end of this month.
Right.
I talked to Mr. Simonson before the meeting. We are not informed of a formal replacement yet.
Okay,
We were given directive to submit all communication to Darlene's current assistant, and that will be distributed accordingly, but always copy until otherwise noticed the assistant director of planning, which is Craig Pfeiffer, who was
Right.
also copied on your communication. And I'll try to remember to do the same
Okay.
if we learn anything different between now and the next HCC meeting, we'll let everyone know. But that was the approach I was
And the next
informed.
meeting is the 4th.
Thank you for calling the attention. Yeah, because of the February federal holiday, it's the 4th Monday of the month, not the 3rd Monday of the month.
So
Oh, okay.
February 24th is our next meeting.
Not remembering that was a holiday.
It was in my calendar.
That's
17th.
correct, the 24th.
Is the holiday, yeah.
Thank you.
Tons of parking.
Is the meeting adjourned?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Thank you, thank you.
Second.
And, thank you, Attorney Deschler, for joining us tonight.
Oh, my
Thank you.
You were very helpful.
Motion carries.